When I first received the offer letter from Vector Core Solutions, I felt like I had finally made it. After years of jumping between contract gigs and small companies that promised growth but never delivered, this job felt like the real deal. Full benefits, a steady paycheck, a downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a job title that sounded sleek and professional, data analyst. My parents were proud, my LinkedIn status glowed, and I was ready to prove I belonged. Day one came with all the typical new job excitement. I put on my best business casual outfit, straightened my posture in the elevator, and tried not to look too amazed when I walked into the bright, ultramodern workspace. Open concept floor plan, barista-grade coffee machine, standing desks, silent pods. Everything screamed innovation. This was a company built on numbers, precision, and performance. After a quick HR orientation and a cheerful introduction to the team, I was ushered into the IT department to receive my company laptop. The technician, mid-30s, friendly, smelled faintly of Red Bull, booted up the machine and began running through my setup. Just as he finished, he paused with a casual shrug and said, "Oh, by the way, we have a productivity tool installed, it's company policy. Don't worry, it's just to help with time management and efficiency. Tracks clicks, keystrokes, idle time, that sort of thing." I blinked. "Wait, it tracks all that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yeah, nothing crazy. Everyone uses it. It's more for team leads to understand workflow. If you're working, it won't even matter, it's just passive data." I nodded slowly. What could I say? It was day one. I didn't want to seem paranoid or difficult. Besides, they weren't hiding it. Maybe it was just a harmless way to boost productivity, help managers redistribute workload more fairly. I chalked it up to modern corporate life, everything's tracked these days, right? When I got home that evening, I opened the laptop again just to get a head start on the tools I'd be using. I clicked through folders, tested my login to the shared drive, and started reviewing some onboarding materials. That's when I noticed it, a tiny, blinking red dot in the corner of the screen. Curious, I hovered over it. A tooltip appeared. Activity monitoring active, mouse movement, click count, keystroke rate, idle detection. It felt like something out of a dystopian tech thriller. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. I'd read articles about productivity software before. Some companies used it to detect burnout patterns or optimize work schedules. I reassured myself it wasn't spying. It was efficiency support. The kind of thing a cutting-edge company would use to stay ahead. Right? The next morning, during our team onboarding call, the HR manager, bright, chirpy, with a voice like a morning show host, addressed the monitoring tool as if it were an electric kettle. "It's nothing invasive," she said, flashing a smile. "It helps us analyze workflow patterns across departments. It's not about punishment, it's about support. We can prevent overload, see where people are getting stuck, and help everyone stay aligned." Everyone on the call nodded politely. A few even smiled. I did too, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about it felt off. Why would they need to monitor us so closely if they trusted us? What did it say about their definition of support if it involved tracking how many seconds I paused between typing? The first few days were fine, on the surface. I got along with my team, learned the ropes quickly, and started contributing to real projects. But I became more aware of the red dot. It blinked every time I moved the mouse. Every time I typed. Every time I clicked between windows. And when I sat still to think. Even for just 30 seconds, the blinking stopped. A cold silence replaced it. The dot wasn't watching anymore because I wasn't doing anything worth watching. That's when it began, the habit of overcompensating. I found myself compulsively clicking through spreadsheets just to show activity. I'd scroll down and back up again, even if I'd read the page already. I'd click on folders I didn't need just to reset the idle timer. It wasn't that anyone told me to do it, I just didn't want to look unproductive. I didn't want my click rate to be low. I didn't want someone in a distant office analyzing my quiet moments and deciding I wasn't pulling my weight. I hadn't even met my manager in person yet, but already I was trying to please a system. The strangest part. I didn't even realize how quickly it was creeping in. I told myself I was just being proactive. Efficient. Diligent. But I wasn't working smarter, I was clicking more. Working noisier, not better. That blinking red dot wasn't just monitoring my work. It was shaping it. And I didn't know it yet, but it was about to shape everything else too. It didn't take long before the red dot stopped being a curiosity and became an obsession. By the start of the second week, I had unknowingly developed a kind of sixth sense for when I wasn't performing enough. I could feel it, this buzzing discomfort in the pit of my stomach, every time I paused too long to think. Clicking through spreadsheets used to be a part of my job. Now it was a lifeline. I'd open folders I didn't need, highlight rows I wasn't analyzing, and switch between tabs every few seconds just to give the illusion of momentum. At night, I'd lie awake in bed mentally replaying my workday. Did I stop for too long at 11:43 a.m.? Did that moment I sat back to reread the client brief get flagged? Did I click enough? It wasn't just about working anymore, it was about looking like I was working. On Wednesday, I went to refill my water bottle and came back to a pop-up on my screen. You've been inactive for 6 minutes. Please resume activity to stay visible in workflow metrics. 6 minutes. I hadn't even taken a full break. That simple message rattled me more than I'd expected. I didn't just feel watched, I felt judged. And then came the performance dashboard. At the end of each day, the system would compile a neat little chart summarizing our activity output. Clicks per hour, average time spent idle, top applications used, and even attention spikes, whatever that meant. Our team lead, Madison, would cheerfully review it during our stand-up calls. Looks like we're staying productive, she chirped on Monday. Though some folks had a dip around 2 p.m., afternoon slump, anyone? Everyone laughed politely. But I saw the flicker in people's eyes. I felt my shoulders tense. I checked my own chart later that evening. I was in the dip zone. By the end of the week, every movement I made during work hours was part of an internal script. I didn't dare daydream. I didn't dare look out the window too long or scroll too slowly. Even reading a long email made me nervous. My cursor had to keep dancing. My hands had to stay on the keyboard. I started keeping a small timer on my desk, my own reminder to switch tabs every 45 seconds, whether I needed to or not. Sometimes I'd open my personal Excel workbook, fill it with fake numbers, and pretend to clean data while the real report waited in the background. Because I could think about work in my head all I wanted, but if the software didn't see me do something, it didn't count. Lunch breaks became chaotic. I'd scarf down food in 10 minutes and rush back to my desk, too anxious to lose metrics points. Once, I made the mistake of reading an article on the company's internal portal. It was about mental health and digital balance. But after 45 seconds of reading, I realized I wasn't clicking. The irony hit me like a punch. I couldn't even read about work-life balance without worrying I looked unproductive. Even video calls didn't provide escape. We were told to keep our cameras on for collaboration culture, and now the corner of our screens showed our live click rate too. Click quiet was the unspoken insult floating around the team. Nobody said it aloud, but we all saw the patterns. People with high metrics got praised. People who dared pause, reflect, or, God forbid, breathe too long. They disappeared into silence. One Friday afternoon, Madison messaged me directly. Hey. Just checking in, noticed a small drop in your activity mid-morning. Everything okay? I froze. I'd spent that hour triple-checking formulas for a complex client report. I was focused. I was deep in thought. But my click rate had been low because I wasn't clicking, I was thinking. I typed back. Yes, just wanted to be thorough on the McKinley report. She sent a thumbs up. But inside, something cracked. This wasn't a workplace anymore. It was a silent game of survival. Not a battle of ideas or execution, but of movement. We were mice running on digital wheels, trying to keep our clicks high enough to matter. And the scariest part? I was getting used to it. By the time the third week rolled around, I had fully transformed into a machine. Not the efficient kind I had once aspired to be, but a twitchy, overstimulated shadow of myself, clicking for the sake of being seen. The rhythm of my day had become a ritual of panic. Click. Scroll. Switch tabs. Click again. Check metrics. Repeat. I no longer measured my success in completed projects or insight reports, I measured it in mouse clicks per hour. There was a number, 1,500. That was the average click count of the top performers, according to the dashboard, which now displayed team rankings under the guise of transparency. It was meant to motivate. In reality, it turned every one of us into a paranoid wreck. My thoughts no longer revolved around strategy or problem solving. They revolved around the counter. If my number dipped below the team average, I felt dread wash over me, like a student realizing they forgot to study on test day. Some colleagues started using click macros, tiny scripts that automatically mimicked mouse movements to inflate activity numbers. Others, like me, resorted to mindless clicking, keeping multiple tabs open at once and bouncing between them like a pinball. The worst part? It worked. Our numbers soared. Our minds broke. By midweek, I noticed changes in my own behavior that alarmed me. I no longer read emails all the way through, I skimmed and replied hastily to keep the cursor moving. I stopped analyzing charts deeply, I just highlighted columns and ran formula after formula, hoping one of them would stick. Once, I caught a major error in a dataset but hesitated to fix it because it would require 30 seconds of staring and thinking, and no clicking. So instead, I clicked elsewhere. I fixed it later. But the damage was done. I had put performance optics above actual performance. Meetings became unbearable. In one-on-one video calls, I could feel my manager's eyes on me, but worse, I knew the system was watching too. It was tracking whether I clicked during the call, whether I moved the mouse. I tried to subtly navigate through dashboards while talking, even though multitasking made me lose the thread of the conversation. Once, I responded to a question with, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" because I was busy clicking on folders I didn't need just to keep my activity level from falling. At home, the anxiety followed me like a ghost. I dreamt of blinking dots and notifications telling me I was idle for too long. I started leaving my laptop on overnight, mouse balanced on a vibrating toothbrush just to keep it in motion. I justified it as a joke. Just beating the system. But the truth was, I was terrified of being flagged. Terrified of being called underperforming, because I dared to breathe for 5 seconds. Then came the moment. It was Thursday, 6:47 p.m. The office was nearly empty. Outside, the sun had dipped low enough to cast golden bars across my desk. I hadn't eaten lunch. I'd been chasing numbers all day. And now I sat alone, staring at my performance summary. 2,133 clicks. 17 seconds average idle time per hour. Mouse travel, 1.3 kilometers. I stared at those numbers. They weren't achievements. They were chains. My right hand trembled from the tension in my wrist. I tried to stretch my fingers and felt a pang in my shoulder. My eyes burned. My neck throbbed. My mind, blank. I didn't even remember what I had done that day. I only remembered the movement. I only remembered trying not to stop. This wasn't productivity. This was panic dressed in digital clothing. I pushed back from my desk, my chair creaking. For the first time in weeks, I looked away from the screen. Out the window. The world beyond my office was still there, cars, clouds, life. I'd forgotten it existed. I whispered to myself, I can't live like this. The red dot blinked again. The next morning, I sat in my car outside the office for nearly 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel with fingers that ached from overuse. I could hear my heart in my ears, feel a dull throb pulsing in my temples. I was early, too early, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Not yet. Inside that glass building, behind those open-plan desks and smiley Slack emojis, was a world where I had to prove my existence not through results, not through impact, but through a stream of clicks. The thought of walking in and becoming that person again, that ghost in a chair whose value was measured by movement, made my stomach twist. Eventually, I went in. Like I always did. Because that's what we're trained to do, show up, endure, adapt. But something had changed. That day, I kept catching myself pausing, intentionally. I let my hand hover over the mouse instead of clicking it. I stared at a spreadsheet for a full minute, letting my eyes actually read, instead of just scrolling for the sake of motion. I wasn't trying to rebel. I just wanted to remember what it felt like to work for real, even for a few seconds. But the system noticed. At 10:22 a.m., the first alert popped up. Your activity has dropped by 26% compared to yesterday. Is everything okay? At 11:05 a.m., a Slack message from Madison arrived. Hey, just checking in, noticed some gaps in your activity. Need a hand with anything? And at 12:18 p.m., just as I returned from a brief lunch where I actually sat outside and looked at the sky, a second pop-up greeted me. You've exceeded your idle threshold for this time block. Please maintain focus. I stared at it. Maintain focus. As if I hadn't been grinding myself into dust for 3 weeks. As if the system's version of focus was something I hadn't already bled for. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like I was moving through syrup. I crossed the office, ignoring the raised eyebrows of a few colleagues, and made my way to Madison's corner office. I didn't knock. I just walked in, shutting the door behind me. She looked up, blinking. Everything okay? I didn't answer right away. I sat down across from her, placed my company laptop on her desk, and with one decisive movement, I opened it and clicked, pause monitoring. She watched in silence. Then I met her gaze. My voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Tired. Firm. Madison, I'm not okay. And I don't think anyone else is, either. This system, it's not helping us work. It's making us afraid to think. I'm spending more time clicking than analyzing. More time avoiding idle time than producing actual insights. I'm not a machine, and I'm not going to pretend to be one anymore. She exhaled, leaned back slightly, and for a brief second, I saw it. A flicker of something human in her eyes. Guilt, maybe. Recognition. Maybe even relief. She rubbed her forehead. I didn't know it had gotten this bad, she admitted quietly. I nodded. It has. And it's not just me. Everyone's just too scared to say anything. She opened her own laptop, pulled up the monitoring dashboard. Corporate's been pushing this data hard, efficiency metrics, optimization reports. They think it helps justify remote flexibility. But, it's turned into surveillance. I'll admit that now. We sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the hum of distant keyboards and the muffled sounds of office chatter. Then she said something I didn't expect. Help me fix this. She asked me to draft a proposal, something that could present an alternative. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew what I wanted: no more live monitoring, no more real-time dashboards ranking humans like racehorses, and definitely no more pop-ups telling me when I was allowed to pause. Weekly summaries. Sure. Feedback loops. Fine. But surveillance masked as support? Never again. That afternoon, I wrote the first honest document I'd created since starting there. No formulas. No charts. Just the truth. A call for boundaries. For dignity. And for the first time in weeks, I closed my laptop not because I had to, but because I chose to. The following week felt like waking up from a long, uneasy sleep. After submitting the proposal, I expected silence. Maybe even pushback. I braced myself for the polite dismissal that usually follows when someone at my level tries to challenge company-wide policies. But instead, something surprising happened. People started talking. Quietly at first. Then louder. A colleague from marketing sent me a Slack message the next day. Saw your name on the proposal. Thank you. I thought I was the only one losing my mind. Then someone from customer analytics chimed in. Then IT. Then finance. Stories began to pour in. About migraines, panic attacks, waking up in the middle of the night thinking about mouse clicks and idle timers. About people working through lunch, afraid to take a bathroom break, pretending to be in a meeting just so they could stand up and stretch for 5 minutes. It was as if I'd cracked a hole in the wall, and the pressure behind it came rushing through. To her credit, Madison didn't try to cover it up. She scheduled a meeting with the department heads, shared my proposal, and invited team representatives to speak. For once, the conversation was real. No branding fluff. No buzzwords. Just tired professionals saying, "This isn't working." The final decision came down from corporate 2 weeks later. The mandatory real-time monitoring. Suspended. Click rate tracking. Eliminated. Idle time notifications. Gone. Instead, they would shift to weekly productivity snapshots, which focused on outcomes, not motion. Managers were encouraged to review work based on deliverables, not dashboard metrics. The company even introduced an anonymous wellness survey, and to my shock, included a line directly quoted from my proposal. Focus is not measured in frequency. It is measured in value. And just like that, the red dot disappeared. It didn't happen overnight, of course. I still found myself compulsively moving the mouse sometimes, even when I didn't need to. That kind of conditioning doesn't vanish with a policy update. But slowly, something inside me began to unwind. I started working differently. Thinking again. Creating again. Lunch breaks returned. Eye contact returned. Breathing returned. I remember one day in particular, a few weeks after the change. It was mid-morning, and I was deep in a data model. I hadn't moved my mouse in 5 minutes, maybe longer. And for the first time in over a month, I didn't care. No one was watching. No alerts were coming. I leaned back in my chair, let the quiet fill the room, and smiled. The work was still there. The pressure didn't vanish. But now, it was human. It was mine. Later that day, Madison stopped by my desk. "How's it feel?" she asked. I glanced at my screen, then out the window where sunlight touched tea. We both smiled. No dashboards. No blinking lights. Just two people, having a real conversation, in a place that once felt like a prison, but now felt like the beginning of something better. And maybe the biggest lesson wasn't about technology at all. It was this. If we let numbers define us too long, we forget we were never meant to be measured in clicks. We were meant to create. To breathe. To be trusted. And no red dot will ever tell me otherwise again.